Hello YouTubers, and thanks for tuning in. For you guys that are coming back to my channel that watch me all the time, thanks for coming back and clicking on it and watching on another video. For you new viewers, please consider subscribing. I come out with a couple videos a week all about concrete stuff. This is a very special video because I don't get to show these very often because we don't get rained on very often. Usually I don't take a chance on pouring a concrete floor when it rains. And today, excuse me, today I thought there was very little chance of rain based on all the weather reports I watched in the morning. I watch usually 2 or 3 different channels starting at 4:30 a.m. in the morning, and none of them called for really any rain at all. So we decided to go ahead and take our chances and pour this. But as you'll see a little bit later in the video, they were all kind of wrong. But the good thing is you'll get to see how I deal with that when we pour a concrete floor, and we got to deal with it getting rained on and still make it come out what I consider perfect. So that's the main goal, is when we pour concrete floors for somebody, we want the very best quality floor. But there's always problems that arise on different job sites, and you got to know how to deal with those problems. That's kind of what makes you a professional at what you do, no matter what type of job you have. So today, this was an addition to an existing house. As you can see, it's about 22 feet wide. I think it was about 30 feet, front to back. And when in Maine, when somebody has a full basement foundation and they want to add an addition to it, this is kind of what it looks like right here. And the reason why those walls are about 8 feet high in the back and on the side, the reason why this front wall isn't 8 feet high is because of the way the land slopes from the back there where the concrete truck is to the front. The land slopes so much that they could step this front wall down and have this kind of what we call like a walk-in basement, a walk-in foundation, or a walk-out foundation. That's why the front wall here is only, basically right at dirt grade. And when they pour these walls, they'll dig all this out. They'll do a footing under. This has probably like a 2-foot wide by 8-inch deep footing under the concrete walls. Then they put their panels on the footing, pour the concrete wall. They'll drill and pin into the existing foundation with rebar. So that's kind of how they connect the two together. Then they strip the panels off the walls. The excavator comes in, does all his backfilling, fills the floor up. He filled this one up with crushed stone, filled the outside up with gravel, and they put that 2-inch styrofoam on the outside because that's just code in Maine. The code enforcement makes them put 2 inches of styrofoam on the outside. Probably a lot of other states, if you're watching in a different state or something, you probably don't need to have that, especially if you live down south. It's more for just R factor up here in Maine, if anything. But we're getting the floor poured, and that was the only access we had, is just from up there. And we didn't really want to get a pump truck because it's so small. Pump trucks are like, between $1,100 and $1,500 just to get them here on site. And, we carry these, the tremmy at first. The first thing we used was a tremmy we hooked onto the chute, and now we're just hooking on our little extension chute. That's about an 8-foot chute. I got a 12-footer, I got a 16-footer, just for situations like this, just to make our job a little bit easier. And we probably had to pull that about 6 or 8 feet, which isn't a big deal. And we're using just our standard floor mix here, 3,500 psi. We got microfiber mesh in it for reinforcement. On our inside basement foundation like this, we don't really need wire mesh or rebar for reinforcement. The concrete floor isn't going to go anywhere. It's locked in by the concrete walls. It's not going to crack all the hell like most people think. We're using water reducer. We got fiber mesh in it. We're going to saw joints in it after we're done. Concrete's not going to go bad just because it doesn't have wire or rebar in it. That's a myth. We do this type of stuff every single day. We pour hundreds of concrete floors like this, and we've done thousands of them in the past. And basically, I've never had one go bad because we didn't put wire or rebar in it. So the slump we're pouring is probably a 6.5-inch, 7-inch slump if it actually got tested, but it's got water reducer in the concrete. Like we're not just adding a lot of water to get it to this slump. The concrete batch plant puts in what's called a water reducer additive into the mix when they batch it out. And that allows the slump of the concrete to be a lot looser than it normally would, just because of that additive. Now, if you just add water to get it this wet, then you're going to definitely weaken the PSI, the strength of the concrete. That's not happening here. We add very little water to get it to this slump. And we use water reducer every day on all our mixes because it just makes your job so much easier. It's literally just a few ounces per yard of concrete they add to get it to be able to pour it loose like this. And it's very little cost. It's just a couple, maybe $2 or $3 a yard extra. So we'll definitely pay for that to make our lives a lot easier. If you're pouring concrete every single day, flat work especially like we do, where you literally have to pull the concrete around, versus in a wall, the chute just hits the top of the wall, drops into the wall, and maybe you got to pull it a little bit frontwards or backwards. But in a floor like this, you're pulling it a lot more, so the water reducer is definitely an advantage. So this is our out, the opposite end of the concrete truck, so we got to make sure we got enough concrete here. And if we have to shovel a little bit out, we will, no big deal. We just don't want to get like too much in there or not enough, so we got to wheelbarrow it around or bucket it around. But the pour actually went in pretty easily, and it's, the weather, we had to start early in the morning. As you saw, it was kind of dark when we started. It was just before sunrise. Probably took us 35 minutes to get it in, and now the boys all left and they went and did something else. I think they're setting up a big pool deck today, and they left me here by myself to finish, which was my choice. And about an hour after we got done pouring, sure enough, it started sprinkling. You could see a few black clouds here and there, and I'm just looking to see if the camera's still on here. But so I dropped the power trowel on. This is probably an hour and a half after the pour. It had been sprinkling this whole time basically, and the concrete floor is actually setting up really, really fast. We did use a little accelerator in the concrete. So this is basically how we deal with it. Now the sprinkling's almost stopped, but and usually what I'd like to do, if the sun came out, I'd try to let the sun dry up as much of that moisture as possible before I got on it. But because the sun's not coming right out and the concrete's getting pretty firm, I got to start dealing with it. So I want to squeegee, and we always carry squeegees around with us. This isn't like the first time this has happened. It happens literally every year. Every year we pour concrete, we get caught a few times. So I'm squeegeeing off as much of the moisture as I can without kind of pulling all the cream off the surface. I want to get rid of as much of that moisture as I can. And then hope it stops raining, because it will dry up pretty quick even without the sun if I can get that stuff off. But this is basically how I do it, just with a nice soft squeegee. I'll try to squeegee as much of that stuff away from the edges as I can. I want to get the edges dry because I got to hit the edges by hand. In the middle where the power trowel is going to do most of the work, that's going to make my life a lot easier. But so what I'm also thinking about is, I got those bowl float lines in there. Now I can't let the concrete get too hard. I'm going to have a hard time getting those bowl float lines out, even with the power trowel. Now, I'm not sinking in a bit as I'm stepping on this concrete. All I'm really leaving is kind of like a wet looking foot mark because of the moisture on the concrete. So the concrete's set up enough so I'm not even sinking in at all. And this is, like I said, it's probably an hour and 15, hour and a half after the pour here. And I can start seeing breaks in the clouds where the sun is going to come out. It's still probably mostly cloudy, but I know that if the sun does come out and the concrete's this firm, and I haven't started, the finishing process yet, that I could get behind here, especially with this little trowel. I'm just using my little 30-inch trowel today. Not a lot of weight to that trowel, so I got to make sure my timing is right. And so what I'm doing right now is I'm just, working the edges. I'll buzz around the edges, still kind of moist on top. Mag float my edges, get them nice and flat, and then obviously I want to get those bowl float lines out. You see, it doesn't look like much on the video, but if you don't get them out right now, you're still going to be able to see the shadows of those even after the floor is done. So I'm making sure my edges are nice and flat, and that's just part of the finishing process. If you skip this part, then your edges right on the edge itself, they're gonna dip just a little bit. It's just the way it works when you mag float your edges initially and then screed or rod the concrete and then you bull float over them. There's always just a slight imperfection in the edge, so you want to make sure you flatten them out really good this first time around when you go finishing. That's why I'm spending a lot of time on them. And at the same time, as I mag them, I'm trying to work out any little bit of slurry that's left over by the moisture and get it out away from the wall. I really want those edges to dry out as good as possible, and that's going to make the rest of my day finishing here when I switch over to the steel trowel a heck of a lot easier. You can see that moisture right there. Even after I've squeegeed, there's still some moisture on the surface. I just want to pull it away. And if I wanted to, I could squeegee this again and get that little bit of slurry off the concrete. So again, like I said, my goal here is, right now the concrete's pretty firm. It's hard, and I got to get it power tried. I got to get this first hit down, and then if I like it, I can leave it and sit for a little bit. If I don't, I could just go right back out. If there's too much slurry, I think, see how I'm going over the bull float marks first. If I think there's too much slurry on it again after this, I could lightly squeegee it again if I need to. You'll see what happens here in a second. So basically what I'm doing is I'm just, the same finishing process. I teach all this in the Concrete Underground. If you look below the video, there'll be a little section that says show more, and you hit that and the description of the video shows up. And in there I've got my training courses where I teach you how to pour and finish concrete like we do. So all this stuff's taught in the Concrete Underground if you want to kind of learn how to pour and finish concrete, how to start learning how to deal with issues. You're always going to run into issues if you pour concrete, because it's really weather related no matter what you do, especially with flat work. So learning how to deal with issues is really part of what makes you a very good professional. You can see no big hurry here because of all the moisture on the concrete. Just going at a good enough pace so I feel like I've got this nice and flat. All the bull float lines are out and taken care of. And then now I can let this sit a little bit till I feel comfortable with the surface drying up enough to hit it again. And I'm using combo blades on this little trowel. If you use a pan or you got float blades that you kick off and then you use finish blades, it's a very similar process, I would say. If you have like a pan or float blades, that's probably going to take out those bull float lines a little bit easier. Now I waited about an hour here, and you can see the surface is dried up some. It's still a little bit wet under my feet. That's why my footprints show. But I don't want to wait too long. Like, I don't want to wait until you can't see my footprints, and then that's going to be hard for this trowel because it's pretty light to get those previous float marks out from where I hit it the first time. So I'm going to just go over it, and as you can see, it's a little bit different color than the first time. That means it's dried up some. And it is, even though it's hard to tell right here on the video, it is getting a little bit smoother. And that's the whole process. You gotta let it, the timing is key. You gotta let it dry up enough so each time you hit it, it gets a little bit smoother. And if the rain stopped, like it stopped in my case, then that timing becomes a little bit easier to predict. If you're getting a few sprinkles off and on here and there throughout the day, that just makes the whole process a little bit harder to deal with. Right now I'm feeling pretty good about where I'm at. This is probably about 9:30 in the morning, 9:30, 10 a.m. in the morning right now. I think we started pouring at 6. We got done pouring about 6:45, 7 o'clock. Like I said, I let it sit for an hour, so 8:30ish I started finishing. Now it's about probably 10 a.m. That's the second hit right there. So, and then I like to hit my edges too. Basically every time I hit it with a power trowel, I'll go out and hit my edges. I've changed over to the steel trowel now. We usually only use the mag float on the first time. Cleaning up top of that wall. Top of that, I don't do the walls. All I do is the flat work, as most of you know. If most of you guys that watch me all the time, you know I only do flat work. But for you new people, I don't do the walls. People that do walls usually hire us because we specialize in flat work. So I'm just making sure that top of that wall is clean. The floor is flat. We checked it with a laser, even though it might look like it doesn't exactly match the front of that wall. The front of that wall was up and down just a little bit. So we want to make sure the floor is flat in there. And so sometimes, you know, we won't exactly match the wall if it's not perfectly flat across the top of that wall. And here I am again, hitting all the edges with my really nice DeWalt steel trowel with matching shirt. You guys like that shirt, straight out of Compton shirt? If you like those shirts, let me know. I'll send you a link to where you can get one, your size. So again, timing is key. You can see where I'm walking before I hit it with the trowel. It's a different color. It's dried up quite a bit now. I'm barely leaving a foot mark. Floor is getting a lot smoother. Things drying up really nice. There's no more of that slurry left. The surface is getting, you know, really nice and creamy and pasty on the surface. So the finish is coming out nicer. Sun's coming out, so it's warmed up really good. So that, having the sun coming out, and I'm kind of in full sun. I got one edge on the shade a little bit, but I'd call this pretty much full sun. That really shrinks up the time in between hits when it's in the full sun like this, especially inside a basement. The sun kind of radiates off those walls and it actually heats it up a little bit more in the basement, kind of like a sauna. So I'm feeling pretty good about where I'm at as far as being rained on right now. And the front edge now is coming out really nice, really slick and smooth. Now I'm not leaving any foot marks. This thing's coming out what I call, it's starting to burn out a little bit. You'll see it's starting to blacken out. It's getting really nice and smooth. You know, if no one tells us what they want for a finish on a floor, we usually burn them out like smooth as glass. So if they do want to leave it as the finished floor, if they want to get it polished later or do something else with it, at least the floor is nice and smooth, and you know, they don't have to worry about having to do something to the floor to smooth it out. We can get that thing just as smooth as a piece of glass if we want to. And it's all with just how you manipulate the power trowel, how you manipulate the blades, the pitch of the blades, the timing you use. If you get on this thing too late and it's just not going to look as good, it's going to have these rough areas. So timing to finishing, power troweling, and everything is really key with this concrete. At this point, the concrete's basically like rock hard. I usually do use a pattern when I finish, and that pattern helps flatten the floor every time I hit it with a power trowel. That's why you see me going back and forth in certain ways. But now you can kind of see here towards the front, towards the right, towards the left, it's kind of like the concrete's kind of darkened or blackened up. That's shined out. That's what we call shined out or burned out. Let me know what you guys call that in the comments. But so this thing's done. So my next step is just, you know, I'll get the trowel off using my little handy dandy crane. If you guys want one of those, let me know. I'll tell you where to get them in the comments. Those are really nice. And just how we manipulate the crane, we kind of put a little bit of advanced winch on it to help make our lives a little easier with a remote. So my last step is literally, this is the last step, then I'm out of here, is, you know, saw cutting the floor. There's multiple different ways we can saw cut this. I usually, something this small, we'll usually just act what we call X. So I'll put one down the middle each way. I'm using a special early entry saw to cut this. It has a diamond blade on it. This one's electric. We got gas powered ones too. You just can't cut the floor this early with any old type of concrete saw. It'll really ravel the saw joint up, but this is how it looks. So again, if you're new to my channel, if you like this kind of stuff, please consider subscribing. I'd really appreciate it. Share it. You returning visitors, thanks for watching again. Click on these videos here to watch some more as they pop up, and we'll see you on the next one, guys.